Hello and welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast. My name is Chris Patton. I'm the CEO of His Way at Work. And I have a guest for you today that I think is going to bring some fantastic information. If you were listening last episode, we talked with Troy Meachum from ACR Supply. Troy is the CEO of ACR Supply based in North Carolina. And Troy shared with us a pretty significant program that they've been doing there at ACR. And today we get the pleasure of talking with the COO of ACR Supply, a gentleman named Corey Salyards. Corey, love to have you on board. Thanks for joining our show.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
So Corey, you are, as I said, COO of ACR Supply. Tell us a little bit about yourself, anything that you think might be interesting there.
Sure. So I've been with ACR now since 2014. And I actually, before I was working at ACR Supply, I was a customer of ACR Supplies. And I started here as the counter sales rep, and became the assistant business unit leader and then business unit leader, and kind of worked my way from there up to COO. I have two children. I don't know. Sorry, do I go personal? Is it okay to go personal?
Absolutely.
I have two small children, a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl, and I've been married for 15 years to my wife. And I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I think that's been a benefit to me and in my role as well as part of this program. I think that's something that is instrumental in success for people.
Fantastic. So. Well, that's good. So you've been at ACR now for 9 years, and you started as a customer. So from the customer standpoint, what was it like to do business with ACR?
ACR always stood out above other of their competitors. That whenever I would call around to do quotes, or I'd get a call to get pricing and availability on items, it always appeared that the people that worked at ACR Supply were happy to be at work, which is unique in our industry. And in the blue collar industry, most people are just grumbling about what they're doing. And that also included the wholesale distribution side. So when I would call in, most of them, it was very gruff. Seemed like they couldn't get me off the phone fast enough, where ACR felt like they were smiling. You could tell they were smiling on the other end of the phone. And so when the opportunity presented itself to come to work for ACR Supply, I jumped all over it because it just seemed like a great environment. It seemed like the culture was in a great place, and somewhere that I could plant roots and grow and be long term.
That's great. So when you walked in the door as a new employee, what were your expectations for your career there? Did you see it as, you said, put roots down, so you were thinking longer term? Did you dream that one day you'd be COO? Did you say, hey, man, I'm going to work here a couple of years and I'll have this place, I'll be running this joint?
Not at all. Not at all. When I came here, I've always been a kind of a planner. I had a 5-year plan, but it was just to be in some form of leadership. It definitely wasn't to be COO. I thought maybe a business unit leader is what we call our branch managers. I thought maybe a business unit leader. I thought maybe an assistant or something along those lines. I didn't really have high aspirations, except for just to be able to lead people and develop people. That's always something I've been passionate about. And I had done that in previous jobs, led people. So it was something that I just thought I could bring skills to. But no, I did not think I'd be COO. That's something that God's led me to. And Troy's put his faith in me. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. And clearly, Troy didn't put his faith in you just on a whim, right? So obviously you've done some things right, and we'll talk about some of those. So how long did you work at ACR before you applied for and got into this lead program that we'll go into more depth here in a minute?
Yeah, it was actually within the first year. There was me and another gentleman named Jonathan had started within about a week of each other. Part of the lead program is you have to be nominated by your leader, and then you have to write an essay on why you want to participate in this course and how you think it'll bring value to you and others. And I actually fought to be nominated at the same time as Jonathan. We're only supposed to nominate one, but I I really wanted to be a part of the program, and I really wanted to, like I said earlier, I'm a lifelong learner. So any opportunity I can get to get any kind of education or development, I'm going to jump on. And so yeah, I fought to be. It was, I think, one of the only times we've allowed two people in the same location to attend. And but I'm really glad that they did, and I really enjoyed it.
Looks like it paid off on their side.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose you're right.
Yeah. So when you started into this program, you'd been there about a year. So obviously you had heard about the program prior to that. What was the other employees' view of the lead program, those that had not been in it yet?
It was a mixed bag of people who you can. Some people really looked at it as a way that they grew and they were gained a skill set and they became equipped with a way to both lead at home as well as in the workplace. And some people just viewed it as this is a lot of work. And I think that's the difference in more of the person than it is the program. But overall, I mean, everyone that had gone through it felt that they had benefited from it, really enjoyed it. And one of the biggest takeaways they had was the relationships they gained with the other people that were in the program at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So what were your expectations going into that? What were you hoping for? What were you thinking would be a result of that program for you?
For me, it was gain as much knowledge as I can and experience as I can around leadership and development and what that looks like at ACR Supply. Try to understand what is it that they're looking for, and then what I gain a common language. I think that's one of the biggest things about a good organization with a good culture is there's a common language that everyone understands. And I would hear these words that I had never heard before used in a workplace. I'd heard them used in churches, I'd heard them used other places, but never before in a workplace. And so it was interesting to me how just like everybody understood that. And so for me, it was partly like almost like a translation to understand what was going on with everyone in the organization. And it was also just to gain any experience or insight I could from people who had been leading longer than I'd been alive, a lot of them. And and just take that wisdom and take that experience and glean as much as I can from it.
That's fantastic. So as you think back through the 3 years you're going through the program, what impact during that 3-year period, what impact did it have on your job and your performance at ACR?
It was the first time I'd heard about servant leadership, which I think was it was a life-changing thing for me because I had always seen leadership and management as more of a top-down, you do what I say, and learning about servant leadership and about you can come alongside somebody and you can both be successful with that person being successful, and the amount of buy-in that you get from that. That was a transformative thing for me early on, and it was something that I still try to implement and teach now with current members. Is you don't have to lead; you can lead from every position. You don't have to have a title to lead, and most times actually you can do a more effective job of leading people in certain situations without that title because there is no top-down feel. There is no stress there. It's you are truly just out. You're trying to make them a better person, trying to make them just a better team member. And so during the program, early on for me, it was learning the leadership toolbox. It was one of the first lessons that we go over, and all the different styles of leadership and when they can be used, and kind of feeling like I belong in these certain sections, but it's okay to bring out the hammer every once in a while. It's okay to bring out these other tools, but know when. Just like you wouldn't use a hammer when you should be using a screwdriver, you shouldn't use that authoritarian type leadership when it's time for you to coach. Those sort of lessons were really impactful on me.
So clearly, during that period of time and then beyond, that positively impacted your employment, right? You don't move from
absolutely
sales counter. A year later, you're in the program for 3 years, and then 5 years after that, you're running the company effectively as COO, unless that program was beneficial to you within the workplace. But give me some idea, what kind of an impact did that program have outside of work?
Oh, and that's actually, I used to talk about this a lot, is I think it did even more personally than it did professionally for me. My wife and I've always had a great relationship, but it equipped me with conflict resolution and crucial conversation skills. Specifically, one of the biggest ones is not telling yourself a story about something. So you get home at the end of the day and you think you tell yourself a story about what's happened. Okay, there's dirty clothes on the floor, whatever it might be, and you start to spin that into, well, they've not done anything all day, and you have no idea what's been taking place, and those sorts of lessons, and also knowing about the emotional bank account and making deposits into the emotional bank account, so that way when there is a withdrawal, it's not as impactful on the overall balance, if you will. It's been tremendous, and it's a lot of. I took a lot of the material home, and my wife and I would go through it together because it was so impactful to me. It just was, again, created that common language, brought that language home.
So I can't even. There's no way to quantify this, but I know with confidence. You and I've just met, but I know with confidence what you just described tells me you've been married 15 years, you've got 2 kids, you've had fights, you've had conflict, you've misread stories, right, with walking in the door. And the material that you went through with ACR, with this lead program, has in huge ways impacted your marriage and your home life. And you're just now getting started because your kids are young, right? And at 15 years, that's a win, but there's another 15 and another 15 after that, and hopefully more than that. And you've seen the impact of this work on that relationship. And then the funny thing is, we talked about work impact and then home or outside of work impact, but the circle is whatever impact it's had outside the home comes back to the work. Because if you're having marriage issues, you're not performing as well as at work. And if you're having work issues, you're going home with a chip on your shoulder and the story is already colored, right?
Absolutely.
So what I'm wanting to make sure the listener hears is don't look at programs as work or home. Yes, there's impact in both, but they affect each other. And if we want to have healthy and engaged employees, even if that's your only goal, to do this kind of a program that impacts them in the workplace and at home, you'll get your desired results, right? I mean, you've seen that.
100%. I mean, I think I have some stories I can relate to on that. It's just during the second year, it's a lot more a one-on-one, less of a classroom workshop style setting. And I would say that the vast majority of the conversations that I have one-on-one with team members regarding the material is actually around personal issues, personal things that are going on, because obviously the things that are closer to home or closer to your heart, ironically, you have a harder time dealing with. It seems to be, when it's a spouse or it's a friend or it's a family member, it can be harder to have conflict with that person because you're so close. And you're right, it dovetails right into work. If you fix home issues, it can fix work issues. I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody who's having problems at work, and usually the first conversation I'll have is what's happening elsewhere, and they'll start to talk about issues they're having at home or issues that are going on, in their church or things of that nature that are causing them. It has a ripple effect on their life. You can't compartmentalize. Like, I think that used to be this kind of adage was, you leave your stuff at home. And that's not true. That nobody can do that. I mean, there's some people that can put on a brave front, but it's still underneath the surface bubbling there. So it's important for me, and I think it's important for leadership to, when you're working with somebody, it's just as important that you're helping them with those personal issues that it is professional issues. Yeah. And again, you talked about I know the podcast title is Eternal ROI. And for me, that's the most important thing is our big purpose, build relationships, impact lives, and glorify God. We want to impact lives, and we want to build those relationships so that if they don't stay at ACR, or, I think Troy said this so many times, and I think it's such a true statement. On our deathbeds, we're not going to wish we'd slip one more drum of refrigerant. We're going to be thinking about the lives that we impacted and the relationships that we had. And that's so true.
Yeah, that's huge. And you're not, somebody might say, well, I can't affect, or I can't go home with this employee, right? I can teach them how to do conflict resolution, how to have critical or crucial conversations. but I can't go home with them. Well, you don't have to. You're sending home with them a toolbox that
Right.
allows them to navigate that on their own. Their home is their own, but as long as you're teaching them and training them how to approach those situations, no matter who they're dealing with, man, it's just such huge life impact.
Yeah. I mean, it starts with, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It starts with trust. And I think that's what's beautiful about this, is that if they trust you enough to talk to you about something that's going on at home, I will often, we do this whether it's personal or professional issues, more or less challenge them. Like, I want you to take the stuff that we've been teaching, and the action item here is to take that home or take that back to your location or wherever the problem is, and try it, test it. This is the perfect opportunity. Just test it out, see what works, see what doesn't, and have the courage to do that. And then any issues or anything that comes up, call me, or in the next session, we'll talk about it and we can workshop the next idea and see if we can't solve it that way. But I agree, you can't go home with them, but you can be alongside of them during that process.
That's good. So give me a sense. Let's kind of walk through the program. You've mentioned year 1, year 2, year 3, and some of the different focuses and goals and even structure of each. So let's walk through year 1 first. Give me a sense of what's the focus, what's the process, what are your expectations, desired results, that kind of thing.
Sure. So year 1 is a real foundational level. It's a classroom setting. I often start by talking about they're going to be discussing as much as I'm going to be, or Troy or Kevin are going to be teaching. It's they'll get gleaned just as much from each other as they will from us in the material. So it's a lot of questioning, and we present material, ask for opinions, and then we start to kind of work through it together as a group. We have a 4-wall rule, which I think is crucially important to the success of the program, which is not everything that happens in these 4 walls stays in these 4 walls. We don't discuss it outside of the room. So it makes it a safe space to kind of bring up some of those issues. And we focus on servant leadership, communication, time management, building relationships, influence, all of the kind of foundational level things that you need as a leader. And we try to equip with the tools on how to do those things. So for instance, like I said earlier, we start with the toolbox. We start with this. These are the 6 leadership styles, and here's when you would use them. And we have them do an assessment to figure out which one they're more kind of inclined to use without any kind of without being conscious of it. It's just something that they lean towards. And then we go out of that and we teach them how to use these other tools. And then we move into the communication side. How do you communicate effectively as a leader? How do you set expectations? How do you have follow through? And then time management seems to be a big one these days, that when we poll going in, because we start, what do you want to get out of this? We always start with an expectation setting meeting and say, okay, at the end of this year, you want to be better at what? Name 1 or 2 things that you want to be better at, to try and make sure that we're meeting those expectations. And time management is usually a pretty popular one. That and conflict seem to be the 2 most popular ones. So we really try and spend time where people would like to spend time in the first year.
That's good. So how many at the start of each year? I assume you're doing just one, I don't know if you call it cohort or what, but one group going through year 1, 2, and 3. Do you go through all 3 years before you come back and pick up another group to go through year 1? Or is it every year there's someone going through group 1, someone in group 2, someone in group 3?
We run them concurrently. They are under different schedules. So our lead 1 program runs from the fall through the spring. We do that to avoid the summer because it's our busiest time of the year. However, lead 2, because it's a more intimate one-on-one and there's less, we travel to them. So in year 1, we get the classroom together, so everybody comes together. So we have coverage issues at our store locations. Year 2, we travel to them. So we do it starting in January to December. And then year 3, we pick up right after year 2. And so we're constantly in year 1, 2, and 3, but new people are going through it all the time. And one of the reasons I one of the things I love most about the program too is that in year one we set up learning partners, so it's beyond just the instructor and the people in the class. It's people that we try and set them up geographically, but we say or sometimes it can be based on age, or it can be based on who we think will most like each other, or those sorts of things. It depends. There's a lot of variables there, but once we pick the learning partners, we kind of try and keep those learning partners throughout the program to really develop that friendship, that close relationship. And because I think that's paramount to people's longevity and tenure in an organization, is that they have a friend at work. Yeah. And somebody that they can talk about what's going on at work and talk about what's going on at home. And so in year two, they meet two people each month. They meet their learning partner to discuss the material, and they meet either Troy or I to discuss the material and kind of go over what their big takeaways were.
That's great. So any given year, how many people in one class or one group?
We've had as few as 4, and I'd say as many as probably the most I think I've ever seen is 10 people, but we try not to do that many. I think 6 to 8 people is about perfect as far as the group size.
That's good. And that's manageable, right? You get too many, it starts to be a little bit more difficult. That's good. All right. So year 2, you said is less classroom. It's one-on-one. You're traveling to them. Give us a sense of what's the material there. What are you working through? I think Troy had mentioned you guys, they have material to read each month or watch, and then you meet with them and discuss that. Give us a sense of what that looks like.
Yeah, so year 2 is probably one of our more intense. I'd say it's the most intense as far as material year. Each month they'll have most months they'll have a book, a video, and possibly an audio at the same time. So it's a lot to do in 1 month. We use Right Now Media at work. We use a lot of their videos. We also do some Henry Cloud, his Ultimate Leadership series on Our Daily Bread University. So it's kind of an 8-staged program. So it takes us through the first 8 months. And then we have a wide variety of books relating to all of the similar topics. We try and keep a month on a specific topic, so they're not reading a book about time management, watching a video about communication, and listening to an audio about teamwork. We try and make this month is teamwork, or this month is influence, excuse me, or this month is about communication. And then we do kind of a take the meat and leave the bone approach to our communication about it. Is we want to know what your big takeaways were. And for me, in all 3 years, every conversation we have it's about the action items. It's actionable. What are you going to do with this information? It's easy to take the notes. It's harder to implement. What are you going to do with this? What's the thing you're going to try over the next month before I see you again, or before we talk again about this? And really try. And so part of their takeaway is, this month I'm going to use this thing I learned to solve X problem. And that can be, like I said, a lot of times that's not a problem at work. It's a problem somewhere else.
And you're doing action items in each of the 3 years?
Yes.
That's good. Man, that's good. All right. So year 3, what does that look like?
So year 3, that was one of the changes I kind of tried to implement when I moved into the program as far as leading it was, it used to be, we always have met via some sort of online meeting platform. We currently use Teams, but so it's always been this kind of like group atmosphere where we would read through the material together. So we do a Bible study. We go through Philippians, and we will read a book. We kind of go through it's a lot lighter than it is in year 2. So Philippians 1 month, a book the next month, and a John Maxwell audio the next month. And then we circle back to Philippians and kind of go through it like that. One of the things I wanted to change was I felt part of leadership is running a meeting. So I give free reign to Troy. I run the first one, Troy runs the second one. And then after that, we rotate through the people in the group, and they get to lead the meeting however they feel. If they want to go through the material, we read line by line, we can do it that way. If they want to just go around and get the takeaways, we can do it that way. We give them carte blanche to kind of run the meeting and lead us through the material, because I would like, again, this is something that is in Troy's heart as well. I know it's all of ours, is we want this to be a flourishing culture. For me, that means we're not leading all the time. We need our people to then take that material, and we want them showing it to their teammates and to their family. And so for them to be able to lead the meeting and teach others the material, I think will have effects on down the road. If they were to leave ACR Supply and they go to another organization, they can lead a meeting on leadership material. And now that organization has potential to have that leadership material being taught at their organization. So everybody's getting better. So
that is really cool. So, what's interesting is I think if you do this kind of a program for a number of years, you could even produce, I don't know, the people that run the company.
Yeah. Yes.
Between you and Mark, both of you have gone through this. It just blows my mind still. I really dug in on that with Troy, so I won't hear, but that's a big deal. We talked about, just to reiterate, the massive impact that has, one, on you and your wife and your family, and same with Mark, but also thinking about what a headhunter would cost to go out and do a search for a COO and a president at roughly the same time, and to hope you find somebody that has character and core values fit and culture fit and competent, trustworthy, or you can just develop them and grow them internally over a period of years, which is what you guys have done. And I'm blown away at that. I think there's so much more meat there we could dig into, but don't necessarily have the time. So here's what I'm curious about now is you've got you and Mark running the company. You guys are all continuing this program. What does it look like in your mind 5 years from now?
Well, I mean, eventually I'd like for everyone at ACR to have gone through the program. And one of the things I've considered recently is, do we do a fourth year, or do we have kind of people go back through it that went through it multiple years ago and need a refresher, or do we just have those sorts of things? We're big believers in process, and we're big believers in reviewing those processes, testing them and seeing if they're successful, and then, making changes as necessary. And I think this is one that we could make sure we do that with this as well, and go through the process of reviewing it and make sure it's still effective. It's still achieving the results that we'd like to achieve, and that we're not leaving people, because I think some people will take this information and then they'll apply it for life. And then there's others that will take this information and then a couple of years will go by and it kind of starts to dwindle. So I think a good thing probably 5 years from now would be to have some sort of refresher or fourth year, or you take the course all over again, because we have added material since the beginning and taken away material and changed it. So,
yeah. So as you go year to year, I know you guys are assessing. How are you, well, I guess I should say, are you measuring the results? Are you tracking any kind of measurement through the program or after the program? What kind of metrics do you guys have in place to tell you how effective year one was, or year two was, or three, or then the whole 3-year cohort of sorts?
Yeah, we don't have any data necessarily. I think it's more of a like you said earlier, we've seen the development of a lot of we've almost hurts us to hire someone from the outside for certain pretty much any position outside of like I had started in counter sales. We want to promote from within, and we want to have long tenure. So a couple of things that I know we track are our average tenure, as well as just the amount of outside hires that we have to bring in for specific roles. And it's been very few as long as I've been here. It's a known thing that we promote from within. We try and develop within and grow from within and internally. So no, I don't. I think that's probably room for improvement there. I think that what you're saying, to me, it resonates with me as a data-driven person, that we probably should have some sort of data or metrics kind of gauging success in each year. And I think that's potentially something that would benefit us, especially as I was talking about in the next 5 years, what impact a refresher or fourth year would have. Just doing surveys and finding that data to figure out where else could we grow in this program.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Corey, congratulations, man. This is fantastic on several levels. Congratulations. Congrats on coming into a company that you saw a difference in, had a desire to work with and for, and then the way you've come through that company and in the 9 years you've been there to running it. I think it took Troy longer before he could run it, but nobody's comparing, right?
Right.
That's just huge. But then also, we've touched on it. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but you guys are having massive work and home and just life impact on 6 to 8 employees per year over the last, 14 years, I think, or 10 years. And there's no way to measure all that impact and the ripple effect of those lives years and years down the road for those that have left the company, but those have also stayed. So it's just a tremendous thing that you guys are doing, and you're doing so well at it. We just want to say thank you, and thank you for sharing. Appreciate you being on, taking the time to walk through the details with us, and hopefully somebody's listening here today that says, you know what, I can do something like that. So appreciate you sharing so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
So I got one last question for you, and that is, over the years, maybe even through this program, you've been given some advice that was impactful, but if at all possible, you would have loved to have had that piece of advice 10 years earlier, could have made a bigger difference. What might that be? What advice would you give to the listener there?
This is going to sound counterintuitive, I think, but one of the biggest pieces of advice given to me was learning when to say no, because I think just like a sculptor should know when to stop sculpting, I think is kind of what I've heard. That I'm not a sculptor, but I've heard that. I think it's the same thing for leaders. It's important for us to learn when to say no, when it's something that we can't handle. It's time to empower our people, and just knowing our limits, and not going past those, trusting in the people around you.
Man, that's so good. And the right no's also lead to the right yeses, right? And
that's right.
And being willing to say no to really good stuff so that you can say yes to the great stuff. So it's great advice. Well, Corey, thank you. I thank you for your time. Thank you for your transparency here today, and just for the work that you're doing at that company, at ACR, and the people you're impacting. So just keep up the good work. Well done, and look forward to talking to you sometime soon.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.